We're here today to record episode 2 of Overcome Out Loud. I'm here with my man Chaz Neneker. Overcome Out Loud. This is a podcast dedicated to real people overcoming real challenges and providing real solutions. I think everybody sometimes can feel stuck in life, and some challenges may not seem as big as others, but I think the more we can share about the common things that people do to overcome the challenges in their life, that we can change the narrative around those issues. And so we're doing our part here on Overcome Out Loud, be sharing some great stories from guests. We're going to have some mental conditioning experts on. We're going to have subject matter experts on a lot of different kind of challenges, and really be giving you the kind of podcast that you can, take notes and start applying these things in your life tomorrow. As part of that, I'm asking everybody that comes on to really get vulnerable. We're going to go kind of to the lowest point in their journey and then talk about the things that they did to come out of, wherever that dark place was. Right, Chaz?
Yeah, and let's continue from where we left off in episode 1 with your story.
Yeah.
So you were in college. You found a group of friends that were helping you get through.
I did. I found an identity with a group of friends. Many of them, So I found an identity with a group of friends up at a dorm that I moved up towards sophomore year, and it kind of gave me a long runway through school because this group of kids, they really accepted me for who I was, and I had a lot of fun, and ended up spending the next 3 years developing relationships with that group of friends from Fairfield. It's a long list, 12, 13 guys, Chris McKeon and Hugh Coyle and Rich Leder and Kevin Christine and Gareth Charter and Craig Maloney and Brian. This group of guys that still today, 30 years later, I spent a lot of time. I was just on the phone with a couple of them the last 2 days planning a trip that we take, a bunch of us every year. And what's important about that is the resilience piece, and when we can feel accepted for some period of our lives, we can elevate ourselves and find some relief. And that happened for me. But what's interesting is how short-lived it was, because I had attached myself, and I think I talk a lot about this when I speak to younger adults, the importance of what we think about ourselves and our own core beliefs. Because, as I went through life, and I've used this saying before, Chaz, wherever you go, there you are. While I had that relief for those 3 years and I had this bit of escape, it wasn't long lasting. It wasn't in my core. It was in a sense, short-lived, because I wasn't changing how I felt about myself. I just felt like I fit in for a period of time. And so, the influence that I have over myself is so important, because if I look for it from outside sources, whether it be from that group of guys or from a girl or from financial success, it's very short-lived. What really matters is what I think about me. So what happened is, as we finished school, call it May of 1988, everybody was going off to their lives. Everybody had career plans or travel plans, or they were moving back home to their families. And I was there once again at this kind of crossroads of being alone. I couldn't go back to Maine. I was not going to go back to, I'm just years away from the incident with the 45 caliber pistol being leveled at my head. And so going back to Maine was not an option for me. So there I was, down in Connecticut, with really no job, no prospect for jobs, nowhere to live. I hadn't yet really figured out what I was going to do. And so it was, I remember when everybody left school, much like the first day I got to school, but in a different way, it was this deep sense of loneliness, this deep sense of fear, this deep sense of not fitting in, and not really knowing where I would go. And again, resilience, I guess, is what I would speak to here is, the drive to just keep moving forward. So despite all of those feelings, right, there was a behavior that went along with me getting my next job. And what that entailed was me putting a resume together. I'll tell you a little story about my fallibility there. So I put a resume together, and I had a couple of opportunities to interview for jobs, and I ended up getting a job at a bank called Dollar Dry Dock Bank as a real estate analyst. I chose that over a training program at General Electric.
Where was that?
It was in New York. So I got an apartment in Connecticut with a roommate, and I started working at the bank in New York as an analyst. And what kicked in were some of those early survival skills, especially my work ethic. So once again, was faced with working alongside guys that had graduated from Yale, guys that I felt were superior than me, that had more experience than me, that were smarter than me. I dug in and drew on that work ethic. In early, stay late. The same things that I talked about earlier. We do things in pattern because we get a payoff. So I developed that work ethic to stay out of my house, and that pattern carried me through to my early working days. There I was, 22, 23, and had done enough in college to learn how to learn and to accelerate, my career path at the bank by working really hard. And so I did that while continuing to drink and continuing to avoid the realities of my past. I had this kind of, I guess this runway of avoidance, where you can avoid things for a certain period of time. I like to say what you don't deal with will ultimately deal with you. And so it hadn't dealt with me yet because I hadn't faced any kind of emotional challenges that were bringing any of my past to the forefront. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I was going to ask that exact question when you answered it. Had it caught up with you yet?
Yeah, the answer is no. It hadn't caught up with me yet. I mean, I was stuffing and burying and hadn't dealt with the realities of how I felt about myself, and I compensated for that with external things. Chasing work, chasing relationships, chasing money, chasing acceptance, chasing validation through achievements. All of those things fueled me. They're like these quick little dopamine hits. Work hard, get a bonus, work hard, get some affirmation, work hard, close a deal. It was like, all those things must mean that I'm okay.
Right.
Although inside I didn't feel okay, I was able to latch onto those things, and they carried me through. And so I had the opportunity to work for. I think the universe is amazing. I mean, sometimes when you've suffered so much, you really can't see the gifts that are presented to you. I worked for a guy by the name of Kim Bradley, who I actually just spoke with about 2 weeks ago. Kim was the head of the real estate department, or one of the heads of the real estate department, and he mentored me, and he believed in me, and he gave me these incredible opportunities. And one of the opportunities I had at the age of 23 was to come out here to California and start working on a portfolio of real estate assets for the bank. So at 23, I was traveling, bi-coastal from New York to LA. I was overseeing a portfolio of real estate that included about 500,000 square feet of office space. We had a parking garage down at LAX called Wally Park, which I was responsible for overseeing the development of. And
oh, really? I know Wally Park.
Yeah, I used to count the number of cars in Wally Park, at night as part of my job. There'd be 8-10 cars in there, and it ultimately became one of the most successful off-airport parking facilities down at LAX.
Sure.
But yeah, we wrote the jingle I bought the rights to the song Lollipop and recorded the Wally Park little jingle, little unknown tidbit about my past. Ba-boom, boom, for anybody who knew the recording of Wally Park. So yeah, I mean, and again, two things happened. And I want to be really clear about it. The one thing that happened, I was attached to those behaviors of working hard, and I was attached to those behaviors of dishonesty. So when I came to California, I kind of created a new version of myself. So now we had the version that left Maine and went to Fairfield. We had the version of me that left Fairfield and went to work at this bank and kind of was just kind of, blinders on, head first into achievement. That became my addiction, right? You can get addicted or reliant upon anything for self-worth, and achievement became that for me. So when I came to California, what I thought I could do, now I'm 3,500 miles. I talked about that ride from Maine to Connecticut as being Aladdin's carpet ride. This was like Aladdin's carpet ride on the Concorde, like on steroids. It was like, I'm now going to go to California. I didn't know anybody in California. I'd never been to California. I'm from southern Maine. And I am going to create this new version of myself. And this new version of myself was going to be attached to all of the things that I had learned over the first few years of working at the bank to attach myself to: achievement, and financial success. And so I came out here and created this version of myself as a successful businessman. A high up at the bank, I was given all this responsibility, and I had no kind of boundaries and no real moral compass, at that time in terms of my dishonesty. So I continued the pattern of dishonesty when I came to California at a subconscious level. It wasn't like I came out and said, I'm just going to lie. It was like I had learned to disassociate from my true self for so long that to me, it was just whoever I needed to be, I could be. So I came out here and projected this very successful businessman. I spent way over my skis in terms of the way that I was attracting validation. So I would spend lots and lots of money on extravagant things, on extravagant clothes, on extravagant dates. I would take girls that I met here in California out to dates and pick them up in stretch limos and take them to fancy dinners. And I had no money for any of this. I mean, it was still just a vice president, a low-level vice president of this bank working for a bunch of guys, but they paid for my apartment out here. They gave me a lot of responsibility, which I really valued and not at the time valued, but appreciate now more than ever. But I spent way over my skis to impress, and so I would do those things and get way outside of my what would be any kind of responsible relationship with money, and go into massive amounts of debt on these extravagant spends, and then I'd be scraping change literally out of my. I drove a Nissan Maxima. I'd scrape change out of my cigarette ashtray, to take it to the utility company to keep the lights on at my apartment. There was just it was such this incongruency between what I did and who I was.
Wow.
And it happened at a subconscious level. It was another survival skill, because I got validation and I got acceptance, and it was all these external things that allowed me to, survive. And I attached my success to all those things. So the more I could ramp them up, kind of push the lever of success way past the point of reality, it made me feel better. But it was empty. What do I mean by empty? There was no real foundation underneath it. It was all just material. It was shiny objects, but it didn't really change the way I truly felt about myself. I still didn't feel worthy of what I was doing. I didn't feel worthy of who I was in relationships with. I didn't feel worthy of myself. And I want to kind of shed some light on the fact that this is all reflective understanding. This is kind of revisionist history, if you would, because I didn't know that at the time. We operate at such a trauma, addiction, operates at such a subconscious level. I didn't know what I had gone through. I just knew there was something wrong with me, and I couldn't attach it to anything except me, because I had let my father and my early teachers and all those early experiences, as I say, write on the pages of the chapters of my life. I never took that pen in my own hand. I never felt empowered to take that pen in my own hand. So everything that was written in the pages of my life had their undercurrent of beliefs about myself.
So I think in society, a lot of people would say it's admirable to be chasing achievement. And you mentioned a little bit ago that you were chasing achievement in an unhealthy way. And I think for most people, if you're going after achievement, that sounds like that you're on the right track, something positive. But you framed it in a way that it was seemingly like another problem.
Yeah, it's a great point to clarify, because I think people that have a passion in life to pursue greatness are so revered and deservingly so. The issue comes in what I call incongruency, or being out of alignment. It's when you're chasing the reason you're chasing that is to fulfill some need that you have inside yourself that to compensate for some lack of self-worth. So if I attach achievement to I'm going to be successful, people or people that I like have certain things and I don't like myself, but if I get these things, then I'll be successful. If you can't accept your value, like I'm good enough where I am, I'm good enough who I am, and I know who I am. And the reason that I want to achieve success is because I have a passion to change the world, or to invent this software, or to solve this problem, or to, advance a passion that I have. All healthy reasons. It speaks to who I am. God gave me a gift of, financial prowess, and therefore I'm going to work for a hedge fund, and I'm going to, I have the gift of relationships and financial prowess, and so I'm going to use that to be able to help people make money in some financial vehicle. That's an incredibly congruent path that you're on. But if inside you feel stupid, not worth anything, not good enough, and you chase those things to somehow compensate for those feelings, the achievement won't last, and it won't have the meaning because you'll always be chasing that next thing. I think that's what comes, some people talk about imposter syndrome, where successful people don't feel worthy of their success. I've listened to high achieving people that hadn't dealt with those issues, and our self-worth kind of acts as a barometer, Chaz, to our success. So we're always going to regulate our success and our failures to this self-worth that we have. Our willpower is always going to lose to our beliefs. So if I believe myself at 70, I'll achieve to 70. And when I achieve over 70, I'm going to tear my life down until I get back to 70 or 50 or 40. Same thing. If I tear my life down to 2 and I really believe I'm a 5, I'll be able to build it back up to a 7. But what I believe about myself, my identity of who I think I am, is very limiting. And I think when you pursue things to compensate at a subconscious level, the runway is very small. You run out of runway very quickly, and it's not sustainable. It's just not lasting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it makes a lot of sense when I now think about all the stories you hear about people that achieved every single goal that they had set out for themselves, and when they got there, when they got to the top of what their personal mountain was, they were still unhappy, if not more unhappy, probably lonelier.
Let's talk about, and I use this example all the time. Let's talk about what I think is one of the greatest examples of this point in our time today is Tiger Woods. Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. Well, listen, Tiger Woods achieved some absolutely phenomenal accomplishments, right? He was on pace to break Jack Nicklaus's record for the number of majors. He was winning majors by record number of strokes. He was a fierce competitor. He was revered, and people that competed against him, were afraid. It was like, if he was in contention, you knew what was going to happen. I mean, this guy had the eye of the tiger, and he was pursuing greatness, but living incongruently. Right. And so it lasts until it doesn't last. So he achieved this pinnacle of success. He was living a life that was incongruent with the persona he wanted us to see. He wanted us to see him as a family man. He wanted us to see him as a father. He had this double life. And at some point, when the story broke, and it was that October, when his wife at the time, ripped the car up with a 9-iron and chased him because, the double life he was leading came to pass. He hit a bottom, and he went and he got whatever help he needed to get, and he reframed his life and reframed what he felt about himself and why he was, reaching for those kind of external things to fill him up. And he got back into congruency. Now I think, what you would see is there's one Tiger Woods. He's living a life consistently and in alignment with who he believes he is. And once he did that, it didn't change his physical gifts. It didn't change that divine spark yet. And he went out after reaching that bottom and getting a DUI in California and fighting injuries and all of those adversities. And the guy came back and won the Masters.
Yeah.
He came back and won a major championship because he got in alignment. He still had his divine gifts, but he was chasing them for the right reason. And I think he's a better version of himself. I think he feels better about himself, and I think he sleeps better at night living the way he's living. And I was a version of that, and I think there's lots of versions of us. And I don't think people, give him the credit that he deserves for the way he really changed his life. And I think personally, when I see him, he looks more content. And I think he'll continue to achieve the things that he wants in his life and make a difference in this world as a result of this version of himself, which I think is one of the most powerful things. And I think that's the message of Overcome Out Loud is we can all get to that bottom. And I'm sure the way out for him, going from the number one golfer in the world, to literally not being able to make a cut at a golf tournament, must have seemed like such a fall from grace, or to be ridiculed or humiliated, on public television as having these affairs, seemed like such a bottom, and losing sponsors at the time, but step by step, he rebuilt himself and became self-aware of who he was and started living in alignment with some values, and ultimately, sponsorships came back, and golf wins came back, and I think more than anything, contentment came back, and that's what I was missing at that point in my life. I was still kind of in that incongruency of the way I felt about myself and what I was doing, and I think that's the difference between achieving, based on a set of core values and a real sense of self-worth and self-esteem versus kind of a false sense of self or being disassociated from who we are.
Yeah. So you're living in incongruency and living beyond your means.
I'm living incongruently,
Right.
yes, and living beyond my means, and it works until it doesn't work. I ended up meeting a lady from California, and got engaged, and we got married, and had two incredible children, and having kept this part of my life from myself, I've of course kept this part of my life from her. I think one of the great, though we've got two wonderful kids, and our marriage ended a few years ago, one of the real kind of realizations that I had was just how unfair that was, to keep that part of my life secret. But I didn't know at the time how important honesty was, because I had learned to be dishonest for so long, that the thought of uncovering this at this point, where now I was finally going to reach that kind of American dream, right? I was going to get married and have the life that I always wanted. And I could kind of just, to me, the past didn't matter. It's like, I'm past that. Here
Right.
I am.
So did she know that, or did she have any feeling or sense that maybe you were drinking too much, or that things were getting out of control for you? Or did you have a good, way of handling it, or keeping it under wraps? Or?
I did. I mean, at that point I was able to, and really the disease hadn't progressed that
I was gonna
far
say,
from
yeah,
me yet.
even if it was there
I
for
was,
you.
it was subtle. I mean, there were times when I just really had these kind of feelings of insecurity. If she had gone away and I was alone, I'd have these waves of insecurity, and while she was gone, I would drink heavily, to kind of mask however it was I was feeling. I was kind of defaulted back to that. But no, for the most part, I mean, at this subconscious level, I appeared to be, successful. I was running, I had a good job. I had since gotten financially responsible, and we had put some money away, and she had no reason to really believe that this wasn't the life that we had always planned for. And it went on that way. We had two young kids and engaged in life the way most normal young couples would, and until in about 2005, the tide shifted significantly. And my mother, who at the time had stayed with my father, and we'll share her story and the effects of domestic violence with some of our guests coming up, including Patricia McLean, who's going to be on to tell her story of domestic violence and the trap that it is. But my mother stayed with my father until a night when he, attempted to help her take her own life. She had reached the end of her runway, and he had gotten a gun and brought it to her, and said if she wanted to end her life, he could help her and show her how. And she made a decision that night in 2005 to leave. And I think my survival skills and my desire to be helpful kicked in, and I brought my mom out here to California, and not realizing what was about to happen. What was about to happen was this life that I was running from, subconsciously running from, that I had convinced myself didn't exist, and all of the pain of it, and all of the violence, and all of the trouble, that I had been stuffing down inside, was sitting there in my living room. And so my mother started to, talk about why she was leaving and what had happened when we were growing up. And, it all came crashing down. It was too much for me. The reality of the world I'd been running from now was front and center, and it became intolerable.
So your wife didn't know about your past at all, really?
No, I mean, she knew that, I had some challenges growing up, but to the large extent that I did, she did not. And again, I regret that immensely, but, at the time I was in survival mode, and I didn't know the importance of congruency. I didn't know the importance. I just figured, hey, look, I'm past that. That was years ago. I've dealt with it. There's no real reason. I didn't think it was going to come flooding back and literally just, blow up every aspect of our lives.
So this was the catalyst to your personal bottom that came up after that.
It is. It's where it started.